reflecting.
Who is the most consistent conservative candidate? The consistent track record has been consistent as a consistent conservative. Consistent conservative.
Consistent conservative.
Consistent conservative.
I find myself at the Basilica every Sunday morning. We're close to Sings. And I just have such a sense of comfort.
Chicken crab.
Godspeed.
Up your game. I never thought I'd hear a president of the United States talking about upping our game.
I think we're going to come away from this debate with two words: consistent conservative.
I think there's a little bit of trouble anybody competing with me on consistency.
And now, Mr. Know-It-All.
All right, here we are, Wednesday on the Jerry Doyle Show. JD here, good to have you on board. Your 6'3" ATM of informacion, loaded up, ready to be accessed. The PIN, 800-876-4123. The phone call is free, so is the data mining, courtesy of, it seems, just about everybody these days. Communist China getting in the game. We're going to talk a little bit about cyber spying later in the program. Marcelo working the boards, Brad helping out on the program today. Emails at the website, jerrydoyle.com. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And the poll question that's up there for you today, the Wall Street Journal, regarding payroll tax cuts, is advising the GOP to, quote, cut their losses and find a way to extend the payroll tax holiday quickly, end quote, or face the re-election of President Obama. What do you say to this? 21% say correct, do it now, fight them later. And 79% say wrong, draw a line in the sand. That poll result to me, is that an ideological response, or is that a practical political response? You can respond to us here at 800-876-4123. Yesterday, as you know, I announced my endorsement of Congressman Ron Paul for the presidency. And if you want to see that, it's at the homepage at jerrydoyle.com on the Vegas cam. Just click on that, and it'll play it for you. I was wondering what I was going to do at 2:54 a.m. this morning, after I had gotten a call about my mom. You know, Life Alert isn't a sponsor on this program, but she wears that Life Alert thing. And if you have a relative, somebody that you're concerned about, it's a phenomenal tool. The commercial that sometimes we mock, I've fallen and I can't get up. Well, she fell and she couldn't get up. So at 2:54, they advised me. They sent the paramedics. She was fine. They got her up and everything was good. So at 2:54, I'm up. Now what do I do? 2:54. It's a little early in the morning. I usually start about 4 o'clock in the morning, but at 2:54, it's not as just like an hour ahead of 4 o'clock. It seems like almost another day ahead of 4 o'clock in the morning. In my town of Las Vegas, when most people are thinking about going to bed or perhaps ordering another adult beverage because they're doing so well at the crap table, I'm up and about. So it's 2:54 in the morning. I said, all right, let's dust it off and let's get it going. And I got to thank all of you Ron Paul supporters for helping me to figure out what I was going to do for the next, 2, 3, 4 hours as I was sifting through your 807 emails that you sent to the website at jerrydoyle.com. Now, the emails ran 806 to 1. 806 who was saying, thank you, we support you, thank you for supporting Ron Paul, a voice in the wilderness, the wolf at the Lone Mountain, all of that kind of stuff. And there was one guy who said that, I heard your comments about Ron Paul. He's dangerous for our country, and I will never listen to you again. So I guess 806 to 1 is a pretty good response rate. And I didn't have a chance exactly to email all of you back because, well, I wouldn't even be on the air yet if I tried to attempt to respond to 807 emails. I got through as many as I could. I read them all. I appreciate getting them all. And then I started to take a look at the response that the endorsement had in ways that I guess we can measure it. The YouTube views, which is out there, I guess it's Jerry Doyle endorses Ron Paul, 5,000 views on that pretty quickly. When I look at the Twitter, went from like 3,100 to 3,500. Facebook went from like 3,600 to 4,900. The emails were off the charts. We jumped to number 1 on TalkStream Live. You guys are on your game. And I could see why the political establishment is frightened of you. I can see why they'd be like, who are these people? And by the way, what do you call yourselves? Oh, besides, I also want to thank Michael Nystrom who owns the website Daily Paul, and the gang at the Daily Paul for putting the story up and putting all the comments up. And you guys rock, and I really do appreciate all that. But I want you to keep in mind, this isn't about me. This is about you. This is about Congressman Paul. This is about the movement, and this is about me getting on board with, we'll call it Ronna Paulooza. I don't know what else to call your movement besides the Ron Paul Revolution, but I'll take what it is at 800-876-4123 that you call yourselves. What do you refer to yourselves as, you supporters of Ron Paul? Now, I know some people out there say kooks, lunatics, fringe group, tinfoil hat wearing loonies. That's what some people say. But a lot of the emails that I got were also from people who were fans of my TV series Babylon 5. I didn't know you had a radio show. I loved your work on Babylon 5. Saw a lot of your character, Garibaldi, in your comments, in your endorsement of Ron Paul. And I started to think about the comparisons that could be made between the Ron Paul supporters and the science fiction fans. Science fiction fans, I wrote about it in my book. For those of you following at home, there's the cover. I put a big picture of my noggin on there. Actually, the publisher did. I didn't want to do it, but they thought it was something to do. The book, Have You Seen My Country Lately? I talk about science fiction fans. And for you Ron Paul supporters and those of you who have maybe no understanding of the Ron Paul supporters, I wrote this about science fiction fans. And I was talking about things that were made available to me because I was the chief of security on a plywood space station at a Warner Brothers soundstage, which is kind of weird in and of itself, but here goes. Science fiction fans have always been the stepchild of the industry. And the fans of science fiction have been unfairly criticized or ridiculed or mocked when, in fact, they tend to be members of the military, cops, firemen, minority communities, scientists, doctors, engineers. They like the science, and they are that forward-thinking group that looks at what the future holds. That, to me, is a large part of what the Ron Paul supporters are about. Very forward-thinking. Science fiction fans tend to be very logical, very fact-based. They tend to look at the here and the now and project to the future what the future might hold. And when I saw how, even at Warner Brothers, and the same thing holds true for my industry, because I heard from a lot of you, but I didn't hear from a lot of people in the industry, the tried and true Republican neocon outlets like the Drudge Report and Fox News and the American Spectator and, you know, the others that, you know, if Rush Limbaugh had a head cold, the future of the conservative movement would be at jeopardy and it would be flashing sirens on every website. The sixth largest show that I have endorses Ron Paul. Nobody happens to say anything about it. It's just like, whoa, make me believe it didn't happen. It's just, we're going to overlook it. We're going to pretend that it's just not a news item. And that's part of what the Ron Paul people's frustration has been, that they've been following this guy for a while. They've been studying his policies. They've been looking at who he is. They've been dovetailing that in with the direction that the country's going in, which I think most people would be in agreement, Ron Paul supporter or not, is not the right direction. And they're saying, what about us? Now, science fiction fans, when they have an opportunity to meet you at one of these sci-fi conventions, and if you want to know what a sci-fi convention can be like, watch the movie Galaxy Quest with Tim Allen and Sigourney Weaver. It captures it like no other movie does. And within the science fiction community, there are always people that are a little off, a little out there, a little strange. And I'm sure there are, as there are in the Republican, Democrat, Green Party, All Night Party, and the Ron Paul supporters. There are always a few people out there that are just a little, even people I worked with on the show. An actor in particular, Michael O'Hare, who was the series lead in the first series, he would get the script, and he'd go to the producers, and he'd say, I got the script. I just need the code. They'd be like, what? I need the code. This way I'll know what you're really telling me, and I'll be able to send that message. And I was like, wow, this guy's not going to be around too long. And he wasn't, because they got rid of him after the first season. But there's always at these conventions, there's always that one person that kind of thinks it's real. Like people would walk up to me and they'd say, when you open up the safe in your quarters there, is it 271343? I go, what? Because when I'm looking at the show and I slow it down, I go frame by frame, I think you're going 27, 13, 43. I go, you mean the combination on the safe? He says, yeah, is that the combination that you use when you open the safe? I'm thinking to myself, it's going to open no matter what I do, because that's what it says in the script. But this guy wants to know what the combination to the safe is, because he's that serious, and by some interpretations could be perceived to be a little out there. And I think the stepchild nature of science fiction fans relative to the industry, our publicity department at Warner Brothers, the woman who headed that up, hated science fiction. She would never promote Babylon 5, only when she was forced to, when they were doing the upfront, so we had to go out and meet the media in some of these rollout events. But she would intentionally, when requests came in for Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, E, whatever the case may be, she would go out of her way to dismiss the cast of Babylon 5 because she had a bias against science fiction. She just didn't like it. She just didn't get it in reality. But you take a look at the success and the longevity of science fiction, and then you come to find out there's a whole different world out there that exists. And I think it's the same thing to a certain degree with the Ron Paul supporters, that you've been diminished. You've been mocked. You've been, oh, you're the guys who live in your parents' basement, and, you know, your Christmas wish list includes new Spider-Man pajamas, and you wear tinfoil hats, and you really have no connection to reality. When, in fact, some of the most insightful, articulate, deep-thinking, fun, engaging individuals that I've run across have been science fiction fans who embrace the science and love the idea of what is it going to look like in the future. And I think a lot of the Ron Paul supporters take a look at where we are and say, what if? And what if we continue to do the same? But what if we do this? And when are we going to do it? And the premise of that, sooner or later, we're going to have to leave this third rock from the sun, this big blue marble, and we're going to have to venture out into space because something's going to happen with a solar flare or a sunspot, or life on Earth as we know it is going to cease to exist, that we're going to be forced to go somewhere else. Some people think that's completely nuts. That's bonkers. That would never happen. But what if it does? And we're not ready. And I think a lot of the Ron Paul supporters are looking at, where does this all go if we continue to do what we're doing politically, if we continue to support the status quo, if we continue to allow the two-party system to retain its stranglehold, its death grip on freedom, free speech, liberty, democracy in America. And they have great concerns about where do we go from here. And they believe, as I do, that the way we go from here forward to have a better outcome without having to leave this planet, without having to leave this country, is that we take control of what we have now, put it back on course. And when I wrote the book, Have You Seen My Country Lately, I asked it from two standpoints. Have you seen it? Because I'm looking for it. I don't see it. And if you do know where it is, please tell me. And have you seen it lately? I really don't like what people have done with it. And I'd really like to be part of something that gets it back into a shape and a form and a belief and a movement that puts us back on the path to exceptionalism and sovereignty. Exceptionalism, sovereignty, personal responsibility, constitutional principles, the rule of law, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not a happiness that's determined and dictated by a government that's trying to tell us how we can better live our lives when they don't even know how to do their own jobs. Maybe they should do theirs first, and then maybe then they'll have some, I guess, gravitas. I love to hate that word, to tell us what we should be doing with ours. 800-876-4123 is the number. What do you Ron Paul supporters call yourself? Because I know you're out there. I just want to know what you call yourselves. Jerry Doyle, give me a call.
Jerry Doyle.
Speaking of appreciate, to the Ron Paul supporters out there, to all those who frequent the Daily Paul, if you're looking for some way to say thanks, I guess don't thank me, as much as I appreciate that you do. But if you want to keep free speech alive, if you want to keep the Ron Paul movement going in another direction that wasn't going in before, you can go to my website, jerrydoyle.com. You can click on the station guide, and you can get a listing of the show where you are, and you can call or email the program director and just say, hey, thanks for having the Jerry Doyle Show on the air. We appreciate you. And there are some people out there, myself, I took heat. There are people, program directors that take heat. There are a lot of people taking heat because I came out and I dared to endorse Ron Paul. That's fine. Everybody has their reasons for doing what they do. I get that. I mean, I got emails from program directors that just said, powerful opening, awesome monologue, great job. Rest of the show is okay. No, anyway, with a smiley face. But I don't want to give his name out. I'll give him, BG and OK. You know who I'm talking about. But there are people that just feel weird sometimes about doing certain things because of the ramifications that are going to come. I look at a magazine in the trades. I don't want to give their name out because they've been good to me in the past. They did the cover story of me in the trade. But in writing about my endorsement of Ron Paul, they said Ron Paul is attempting to milk this endorsement as much as possible. He even sent out a press release about Doyle's endorsement. Isn't that what people do? Oh, it's what they do when they want to make it look like, yeah, I think you can fill it in for yourself. 800-876-4123. Stick with me.
This is the Jerry Doyle Show. This is the Jerry Doyle Show.
Let's travel down to Atlanta, Georgia. Levent, line 7. Levent, thanks for holding. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
You're very welcome. Thanks, Jerry, for having me on. I just wanted to say that I feel too many people nowadays in the media are saying what they're told to say, basically, by their bosses and superiors. And I really commend you for standing up for our First Amendment rights and saying how you feel. And I really wish more people in the media would follow your lead. I feel like there would be a lot more truly fair and balanced coverage out there if they did follow your lead rather than just say that they're being fair and balanced.
Did you hear the comments, Levent, of from Neil Cavuto about the media bias against Ron Paul? Did you hear what he had to say on Fox yesterday?
I actually did. I caught wind of that, and I heard it, and I actually sent an email his way to Fox News as well, and I felt like that was a really stand-up move on his part.
Yeah.
There's a few people there that I would agree with. Himself, Judge Napolitano on Freedom Watch as well is a pretty stand-up guy. And I like Stossel as well. But, yeah, I did catch that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, we're going to play it for the listeners now, Levent. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. 800-876-4123 is the number. There has been this media bias against Ron Paul. There's electioneering, and then there's the legal aspects of electioneering. Electioneering could be active or passive. Passive means you wear a button that says, I support Ron Paul, or I support Mitt Romney, or I support Barack Obama. That's passive electioneering. But when you start to involve yourself in the process and try and dissuade or persuade people based upon a lack of information, well, to me, that's starting to get into the areas of illegal electioneering, where you're not giving the voters a fair shot at making the assessment for themselves. They like the way they've got it. They don't want it to change. They don't want the newbie coming along. That's why we have to have a crooked Treasury Secretary after a crooked Treasury Secretary after a crooked Treasury Secretary, because they're all a part of the same scheme. If you remember the movie Dave, I believe he brought in his nebbishy Jewish accountant at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "Look at these books." And the guy said, "Dave, if I ran my business this way, I'd be in jail." But what was that guy's name? Charles Grodin? Was that, I believe, who played the accountant? If they brought in a guy like him into the Treasury, this is why Ron Paul calls for an audit of the Fed. If they brought him in and he looked at the books and opened the books and showed people what they were doing with the books in this crime scene known as bailouts and stimulus, somebody's going to have to be accountable. Somebody's going to have to be responsible. So instead of bringing in the guy who knows that the books are cooked, they bring in the guy who helps to keep the heat on the pot, to keep it cooking. That's why we get the uniquely qualified, self-avowed tax cheat, Tim Geithner, as the next Treasury Secretary. And that's why we got the last guy, Shifty Paulson from Goldman Sachs. And that's why we got, and that's why we got, and that's why we're getting. And until we get something different, nothing's going to change. But what is starting to change, and I'm noticing in the media, is that people are now at the point of seeing such a blatant bias against Ron Paul that they're kind of starting to talk about him. I don't support him, but what's happening to him is something that I feel compelled to talk about. This Neil Cavuto defending Ron Paul against the media establishment's bias and, in some cases, blackout of coverage of Ron Paul.
2 weeks from now, some very powerful Republicans fear Ron Paul wins the Iowa caucuses. Well, heaven forbid. Iowa's governor going so far as to say that if the Texas congressman wins, ignore it and look at who finishes second. My own colleague, Chris Wallace, says if Ron Paul takes Iowa, it discredits the state's caucuses. Bill O'Reilly says Paul can't win the nomination, even if he does win the Iowa caucuses. Juan Williams says, well, he's unelectable. Bill Kristol says he's unelectable. And scores of Republican State Party chairmen across the country say Ron Paul is unelectable.
Unelectable. They've decided. They're the deciders in chief. They've decided for you that Ron Paul is unelectable even before a lot of people, most people, have had a chance to come to understand who he is and what he stands for. And in the next clip, Cavuto on Fox News, which is a Republican cheerleading outfit with focus group phonies like Sean Hannity, Neil Cavuto boldly states, in his opinion, Ron Paul, Iowa, Ron Paul's going to win.
They fear the better Paul does, the worse the party's chances next fall look. Well, then, get ready, guys, because I could be wrong, but I think Ron Paul does win the Iowa caucuses and does unleash all this ridiculous paranoia all over again. And for what? On the notion that as the Texan gathers heat, he sends his party down in flames? Didn't they say the same about another Iowa sensation named Jimmy Carter in 1976, arguing he would send his party down to defeat against an otherwise very defeatable Jerry Ford? He didn't. Or Ronald Reagan against a supposedly vastly more electable George Bush Sr. That no way in heck he could beat Jimmy Carter in 1980. He did.
Now, here's where Cavuto starts to say, look, I'm going on record. I am not a supporter of Ron Paul, but very important distinction here. He recognizes how the media bias is really starting to expose its soft underbelly. And Neil Cavuto goes on the record here.
History is full of candidates who couldn't make it but did, and sure shots for whom the White House was theirs, but in the end, apparently was not. Now, I'm not here as a supporter of Ron Paul, but as an opponent of anyone dismissing Ron Paul or anyone else at this stage. They're all due a fair hearing, not an unfair clearing. Now, if Ron Paul does surprise, don't blame it on average voters who didn't see it coming. Blame it on haughty media pundits who continued dismissing him, even as he did. We, in my business, have an obligation to shut up on this stuff and give them their due, give you their vote, then pontificate.
Then pontificate. One of the things I hate about what the media does is they try and get you to figure out what it is that you're supposed to think about a debate before you see it. And then immediately after the debate's over, they tell you what you just saw. I know, I just saw it. I just watched it. Sometimes I'll watch it twice. And I'll take a look, I'll listen, make notes, and I go, wow, I think so-and-so won, or I think so-and-so had a better showing than the last time, or I thought this was really a poor performance by so-and-so. I see some inconsistencies in what they said this time versus the last time. But when you've got people out there that are intentionally spinning it to make it something other than what it is, that's where the anger and the frustration, especially among the Ron Paul supporters, starts to show itself. Now, I know there are people that just say, I'm a Republican, so I can't listen to these guys, or I'm a Democrat, so I can't listen to these guys. Well, what we're doing, folks, is we're locking ourselves in these echo chambers of these gated communities of ideology, and we don't allow anybody else in those gates. Are you a true believer? Yes, you can come in. You're not? Oh, you have to stay out. Now, you have to watch a lot of stuff You have to read a lot of newspapers because the same story in the LA Times is different in the Washington Post or the Washington Examiner. It's different than it is on MSN.com or Newsmax.com or Reuters or The Street or the Times Online or Town Hall or the Wall Street Journal or WorldNet Daily. All of these, CNN.com, Breitbart, the Associated Press, all of these stories have such a different flavor to them and slant to them that you have to look at all of them to get an understanding of what's going on. For those of you Republicans out there who refuse to watch anything other than Fox or whatever it is that you watch to tell you to turn to page 63 and sing from the hymnal and we're going to sing. Didn't we sing that song yesterday? Yes, we sang that song yesterday. But why are we saying we're going to sing it again today? Why? Because that's what we told you to do. And people, all right, we'll sing the song again. Here we go. But for those of you Republicans who refuse to watch The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, it's because he's a liberal. That liberal, he wants to ruin America. He's in the pocket of that socialist Barack Obama. Why would I listen to Jon Stewart? Because Jon Stewart months ago saw what was happening with Ron Paul. And he was pointing out what Cavuto pointed out. Not a supporter of Ron Paul, but an opponent of those who dismiss him. Jon Stewart got it right. Jon Stewart saw what was happening, and he pointed it out on his program.
So now with Pawlenty dropping out, Rick Perry dropping in, and Michelle Bachmann and Ron Paul dominating the Ames straw poll, we got ourselves a race.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, you know, we haven't mentioned, and we should.
Thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got. He lost to the guy who lost so bad he dropped out of the race. Santorum?
Santorum. Now, did you hear the audience in the background? Even they got it. Even they saw the bias against Ron Paul. They were appalled at what the supposed Republicans, the constitutionalists, the conservatives were doing to one of their own. Now, if you don't watch Jon Stewart, you're not going to see that. But you see, to me, people who refuse to take a look at other perspectives, other points of view, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, you got to know what they're doing and what they're saying and what they're thinking and how they're going to go about doing it. To me, that says that people's beliefs are so shallow that they're afraid to let something else in because it might cause them to question what they think they really believe. When you come to a decision because it's your decision and you've analyzed and you've researched and you've thought about it and you've contemplated and you've slept on it and you've debated it and you get to that point, you go, boom, here's where I'm at, why I'm there, and why I'm willing to go forward and do X, Y, Z. But if you don't listen to Jon Stewart, even Bill Maher is a tool. He's a total tool. But every once in a while, the broken watch is right twice a day. And occasionally, Bill Maher hits it. Now, you might disagree with everything Bill Maher says, but listen to the audience. See what they respond to. Understand what their hot buttons are. That gives you information that helps you to make a determination about which way people are going. Those people, you can criticize them, you can castigate them, you can do whatever, but they're going to vote. They're going to vote. They don't vote. They just sit home and smoke pot all day and eat Oreos, and they watch Jon Stewart, and Bill Maher sits at home watching Bill Maher. I know Bill Maher's a tool. I've seen him at the Playboy Mansion. He's a tool. He's just one of those typical whiny, spineless Hollywood liberals that I was around for 12 years. He's a 200-pound fish you can land on 10-pound test. As if he weighs 200 pounds
The
at all.
Jerry Doyle Show.
People are getting hip to how they're being manipulated into going along with the status quo. Jesus spent time with the sinners. Why would he hang out with the disciples? He's already got their vote. 800-876-4123.
Jerry Doyle.